Hello and welcome to Chapter 8 of AP Psychology. We're covering memory, which makes me think of South Park and the member berries. You remember, right? Oh, yeah, I remember. If you don't know about those, you should probably check it out. There's a whole season of this stuff with the member berries. So let's get into memory. It's an essential part of psychology. It's an essential part of life and school. In my class, we cover this right after the introduction, so you can have tips to a better memory. In fact, later on, I'm going to post, and you might check out 5 steps to a better memory, and they work. They're scientifically proven things that will help you remember items a lot easier. So, reconstructing the past. Memory is the capacity to retain and retrieve information. It's also the structures that account for this capacity. Short term memory, for instance, is in the frontal lobe. Long term memory is in the temporal lobe. And then you have the hippocampus, which we use as mnemonics in class. It relays the messages. The hippocampus relays the messages. And so, learning that basically persisted over time, it lasted, is memory. You guys, maybe you're too young to play Simon Gen Z. I don't know. Maybe there's an app version of it now, and you can play with each other, and battle each other on phones. But this was a big, kind of game back in the day, and you had to like make sure you had to, follow that along and all that. And so memory is also information that has been acquired, stored, and then can be retrieved and used. But how reliable is it? You might remember the fact that the capital of Nebraska is Lincoln, but you can't remember what you ate for lunch yesterday. You can remember how to throw a ball, but you can't remember what pair of shoes you wore on Tuesday 2 weeks ago. And so, how reliable is it? And so, this is kind of controversial, especially with eyewitness testimony, which we'll cover later in the chapter. It is absolutely necessary to function for society. If you had to relearn everything every day, especially procedural memories, how to do things like brush your teeth and walk and open doors and I don't know what class to go to, you couldn't function without memory. It's an essential building block to a functioning society. So the analogies of memory through the ages have all kind of reflected how people recorded information at the time. At one point, they thought memory was like a soft wax tablet, or a blank stone, or a printing press, or a movie camera to go really old. And now we use a computer or maybe a smartphone is a way that we can use as an analogy to say this is what memory is like. Memory is selective. You pick and choose what's important and what you want to remember. Sometimes you remember things you don't want to remember, and you're like, why did that pop into my head randomly? I don't know. So it is selective. And so what happens is when you sleep, your brain consolidates. The hippocampus consolidates memories. It prunes away the things that are unnecessary and strengthens the memory into the temporal lobe of what you need. And so you have to sleep to remember, and you need to remember to sleep. Or maybe I did that. We got to remember to sleep because you sleep to remember. I did that backwards. I didn't remember it right. Durr. And so they say that you need, a pretty good period of time, almost 2 weeks of REM sleep, because REM sleep is when memory consolidation happens to really strengthen a memory. Otherwise, our minds would just fill up with junk, just random junk. And one of the first guys to really kind of study this scientifically was Sir Frederick Bartlett in 1932. And subjects were given part of a story, and then any part that they were unfamiliar with and they couldn't remember, he found out they just started making stuff up. And so this wasn't what they were remembering. They were just infusing their own ideas and creating false memories is what they did. And so memory is a reconstructive process. You rebuild it. And so sometimes psychologists think that when you remember an episode of your life, an episodic memory, you're not actually remembering what happened. You're remembering the last time you remembered it. And so how your emotions and your situations happen when you re-remembered it and stored it again can actually influence and affect the memory. There's been hundreds of studies that have replicated Bartlett's findings, and so they found a lot of things. Source misattribution is kind of fascinating. This is being unable to separate your original experience from what you added after the fact. Little details and things like that you can't separate the two. You're not sure what you remember or not. My youngest, bless her heart, she swears she remembers her second birthday. Long-term memory doesn't really kick in, and she describes it really well. She describes a picture she saw of her second birthday and maybe a little bit of a video we did on the phone. but she doesn't really remember it. She can't separate it in her mind. Did she remember the second birthday or the pictures in the video? So I hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. It's also called source confusion or source amnesia. And so people kind of misattribute things. Like the best thing about Twitter is that you can come up with a quote and assign it to anyone you want. Albert Einstein said that because it was on Twitter. For instance, I don't remember my first day of school. First day of kindergarten at Riverside back in 1983. Oh my goodness, way long ago in the 20th century. All I can remember is the door going into it. But then over the years, I kind of remember, it was kind of a sunny day and I was wearing an outfit and my brother was there. And now I can't separate whether or not what I actually remember from the first day of school, or was it just this picture here of me on the first day of school. And so I don't know. I do remember that door. By the way, this is my son. This is the same time, first day of kindergarten. Genetics. It's a heck of a thing. I don't know. And I'd be interested to interview him about his first day of school and see what he remembers. Then we have something called flashbulb memories. The things that are so emotional, they're so shocking that they capture the surprise, illumination, and we seemingly have these photographic details that characterize them. You can remember every little thing about this terrible event that happened, and they're usually negative things because for survival, our minds are like Velcro, and in terms of negative emotions and negative memories, they stick. Whereas positive things kind of slip on by like Teflon. The amygdala, which is fear and anger in the animal part of the brain. I know it's amygdala, but I like to do amygdala. Fear and anger drives emotion into the memory, and it sticks because it's a survival mechanism. And so it had survival value in the past. Like, don't go by that tree. There's a giant snake that's going to eat you. But they've done studies, and even these flashbulb memories over time, they fade, and people forget details, and they misattribute other details, and they kind of confabulate some of these things and make them up. They remember the gist of things, and so these flashbulb memories, they seem to happen every generation. Studies show that people's confidence, though, is like, I remember it. I remember this so strongly. I know it. But they're, in fact, wrong. For instance, our current president, President Trump, remembers Muslims celebrating 9/11 in the streets of New Jersey. That didn't happen. They've proven through the news and through evidence it didn't happen. That stuff did happen in the Middle East and other countries that maybe dislike the United States, but in his mind, he's kind of mixed them and cross-wired it, and so he has source from his attribution, but he remembers it, and his confidence is high. Some other flashbulb memories in history, Pearl Harbor here, December 7th, 1941. The Kennedy assassination, November 22nd, 1963. And then the Challenger explosion in 1986 was very shocking. They're saying that millennials and Gen Z, you guys, have not really had a flashbulb memory. Probably the closest thing we have is to the shock of the coronavirus, and then suddenly everything being shut down. Suddenly on, what was it, Friday the 13th? I mean, the last normal day we had was Friday the 13th. Anyone ever think of that? Oh my goodness. So confabulation's another thing where you confuse an event that happened to someone else for something that happened to you. So I have this friend, his name's Charlie Beagle, actually. Kind of an interesting name. We grew up in Appletree, and this is Appletree here, is a trailer park in Newcastle. And Charlie told the story one time, like, that I was this cocky soccer player. And then before the game, I told the other team on the kickoff that we didn't know how to play soccer. My dad coached it. I was going to kick it in the goal. And then apparently I did it. And so I'm like, I don't remember that. But the details, the people that were there, the setting were so believable that I found myself later on retelling that story that, yeah, one time I kicked it in the goal to start the game. Then I started thinking about it. It wasn't me. It was my friend Tim Ligon. And so I had confabulation there. I believe that I remembered something correctly, but it never really happened. My friend mixed up the details. And so it's an imagination inflation. My own imagination bolstered the belief that it actually happened. It seemed plausible. I was kind of cocky. I kind of ran my mouth because I was kind of a little bit of a turd. I had a big leg. I could kick the ball pretty far. And we used to try to kick the ball in the goal at the opening kick because we didn't know that in soccer you have to teammate has to touch it first. It's technically an indirect kick. But hey, we were playing in a trailer park in the 80s in Newcastle and Appletree. And so I thought this actually happened. So a lot of the details made it seem real. And so, Charlie's little story, I kept believing for a little while until I really kind of started thinking about it. And the event was easy to imagine. So that's what confabulation is. When you remember something that didn't actually happen, it happened to someone else, but you remember it happening to you, and you have this confidence. You kind of, it's believable that you really truly believe it happened. Here's an example. It's also personal, but not just about me. So we did this big family trip to Disneyland long ago, and my little one here was 2, and so we didn't take her because my wife and I'm a basketball coach. I didn't want to play zone defense at Disneyland where we're always outnumbered 3-on-2. Plus, 2-year-olds are not going to remember it. So we left Kensington with Grandma and Grandpa back home, my wife's parents. And then when we got home, we gave her a hat, and she was excited. And so then we did this big family portrait, and I felt bad that my youngest wasn't in it, so I photoshopped her in it. And then we had a big printout, and we gave it to my dad here, who's standing in the middle. And when Kensington, as a little girl, saw it, she goes, "I go Disneyland?" And I said, "Yes, you went to Disneyland." And I had her. She was going to believe it for the rest of her life. And then her brother and sister ratted me out and said I photoshopped it. Darn you, Christopher and Kensington. Or excuse me, Christopher and Emerson. One of my kids' names. And so that's all I have today. Sorry, a little bit personal there. Next time I'm going to talk about memory and the power of suggestions. If you have any questions, let me know. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. Yay. Learn.